We'll start with my greeting. Good morning to our friends in North and South America. Good afternoon to our friends in the UK and Europe. Good early evening to our friends in the Arab Emirates. Good early evening to our friends in India. Good evening to our friends in Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, and good late evening to our friends in Australia. Hope you're well. Nice to see your faces. I believe we've some questions, JC.
Question 1, Dear Ajahn, what is consciousness? Do animals have consciousness? What happens to consciousness when a person or animal dies? Thank you.
Interesting question. I can't sit here and tell you that I absolutely understand what consciousness is. It is a bit of a mystery, but I can tell you what I've heard about it from Buddhist texts and Buddhist teachers, and some sense that I have for it from my own nearly 30 years of practice. According to the Buddhist philosophy teaching, which we tend to believe is a description of truth that Lord Buddha could see. There are the 6 sense bases: eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and the mind. And there is actually consciousness associated with all of these things, so that when a sound occurs and the ear sense base hears that sound, there's some consciousness that is born and dies that knows sounds. Similarly with smells, similarly with tastes, similarly with body contact. So consciousness is, as we study, bound by the 3 characteristics, which Lord Buddha also says is the deeper truth of reality: impermanence, unsatisfactory, and not self. I believe that an arahant can actually see this. So an arahant is someone whose mindfulness is described as mahasati, great mindfulness. Great mindfulness can observe consciousness arising and passing at sense bases. And the result of seeing consciousness arising and passing at sense bases is understanding that it's not a self, because one can see that it's all in flux and it's all conditioned, and there's no abiding permanent entity or being. In terms of how we practically understand it, there is rupa, which is body, and forms. So the Buddha statue behind me is a Buddha rupa. The monk talking to you has the form of a human being. But then there is the mind. So we study nama and rupa. So the consciousness is related to mind, nama. So what we know is that we are sentient. What does that mean? It means there is something sitting there which sees things, hears things, tastes things, smells things, feels things. And there are memories, and there are hopes, and there are aspirations. So all of those things are occurring within consciousness. So we are conscious. Do animals have consciousness as well? Yes, they do. So, and then they have awareness of pleasant, awareness of unpleasant, and then they also have neutral, just like we do. Pleasant feelings, unpleasant feelings, neutral feelings. Very interesting recently seeing, I got a new kitten, and my older cat was upset at first. It was very interesting to see how similar to a human being the other cat was, because when I picked up that cat, who normally loves me, Ling Hong is his name, he would growl. He would look at my face and he would growl. Like seriously, he did that for 10 days, and he didn't purr for 10 days. It was as if he was saying, how dare you let that other cat into our home? You've been unfaithful. And it took him 10 days to process his hurt and his grudge. So what's occurring? Obviously, the cat has some kind of a sense of self. Obviously, the cat has seen something that is perceived as unpleasant. It's heard something and smelt something that is perceived as unpleasant, has had an emotional reaction. So yes, animals are experiencing these things to lesser and greater degrees. Finally, after about 10 days, my cat stopped growling at me and he purred today, and the cats ate from the same bowl, and then they played with each other. And I think the elder cat finally realized that he's actually happier now that he has a friend. But it took him 10 days to work it out. So anyway, yes, cats are conscious, animals are conscious. And I suppose there appears to be differing degrees of sophistication and development among the animal realm. So, if, for example, elephants and dolphins seem to be quite sophisticated. And what happens to consciousness at death? Now, that's interesting. That's interesting. So we understand that the ear consciousness is arising and ceasing, arising and ceasing, eye consciousness, all these kind of sense-based consciousnesses are arising and ceasing. In the Tibetan tradition, they talk about a more subtle type of consciousness, and in the Thai tradition, they call about chitta, which is mind. And so something moves between births that is not rupa. So your physical body obviously doesn't go to your next birth. And I've had the opportunity to look at many corpses. The corpses tend to stay still. The mind is gone. They've even done some studies on these things where at a certain point, I can't remember exactly how many grams, I think it's a pound or a pound and a half. At a certain point, the body gets mysteriously lighter. Not long after death, something leaves that can be weighed, but the ordinary mind can't see. So the subtle mind propelled by karma. So the sutras do say that. The sutras do say that there is a future birth, and that future birth is determined by karma. So yes, minds take rebirths. In terms of what we do with this situation of having a body and a mind and having all of these types of consciousness, that's why we try to make good karma and refrain from making bad karma, is the more good karma you make, that's going to ripen as pleasant sounds, pleasant sights, pleasant tastes, pleasant feelings, attractive and able forms, and unpleasant and a conducive environment, salubrious environment. Unpleasant karma, bad karma, will ripen as unpleasant sights, unpleasant sounds, unpleasant tastes. It's why some people get born in places where there's very harsh weather, very not much food, war, crisis, scarcity. These things probably determined by karma to some significant degree. So we want to make auspicious and wholesome karma so that we get a nama and a rupa, a form and a body, a form and a mind, where we can practice to understand it and let go of our attachment to it. So that's why we train in this generosity, ethical behavior, and mental cultivation, because we need to see it clearly as it is. And because until we see it clearly, we are bound by this attachment, our attachment to it. And even if we don't know we're attached to it, we are. And that latent grasping and latent clinging will thrust us into birth after birth, and subsequently life after life, and subsequently death after death of the bodies and the forms. Apparently, there are very, very high Brahma realms where it's just mind, no form, and no sense bases other than mind. So just a mind absorbed in pure samadhi for that lifetime. But that's not the best situation to try to free yourself from cyclic existence, because when it's just a mind experiencing a very high and pure and refined state of samadhi, that's not capable of reflecting on impermanence. So it won't see unsatisfactoriness and not self. And so the human form is a good one for being able to examine pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral, and also impermanence, because we have day, we have night, we have good moods, we have bad moods, we have seasons, we have youth, we have old age, we have death, we have all sorts of things that we can contemplate if we're paying attention. So it's interesting the amount of interesting/terrifying the amount of interest and investment that's going into robots and AI at the moment. And I think there's these kind of certain types of people that want to feel like they created life and created consciousness. It's kind of a theory that once you get the robot developed to a certain point and the AI developed to a certain point, that they'll be able to create consciousness. This is probably the downside of Western style science, is that you come up with a hypothesis and then you try to prove the hypothesis. A better way of trying to understand what truth is making some experiments and paying attention and just being receptive to the truth, rather than prove it to be a certain way. Just pay attention, just study. That's what Lord Buddha did. Probably what will happen, I fear, is once the robots get developed to a certain point, consciousness will move in and people will think that they created it, but all that's happened is a wandering mind that with some unresolved karma just inhabits a robot's body instead of an android's body instead of a human body. But the people who created it will think that they created that. And yes, and if that android ends up having access to AI, yeah, that entity might be quite have a lot of good karma. Or see, we don't know, do we? The unfortunate, slightly scary thing is, if a migrating mind incarnates in a robot that has access to AI, you don't know if it's coming with good intentions or bad intentions. So you can create this thing which may have a lot of power, and then you don't know what whatever moves in does with that power. That could literally be the ghost in the machine, as it were. But if the android is if the android body and the android access to AI would give that being more pleasure, more happiness, then one would assume that the consciousness that is being reincarnated is one with a lot of good karma. But the thing is, I know I'm going off on a few tangents here, but this is, Mara is a being with great merits and currently deluded and affected by wrong views. So you could have a powerful being with a lot of merit affected by deluded views. And, we have enough human beings who are psychopaths who want to enslave everybody and own everything and be all powerful. So how do we know that it's not one of their consciousness that gets reborn in the android with access to the AI? So we don't, we don't know. My personal feeling about it would be, don't mess with it. And I also don't believe we need AI to answer the problems of the world either. I think oftentimes we have answers to the problems of the world. The problem is there are selfish and mean people who don't make the changes, that obstruct the changes that might occur for their own selfish ends. So I think one of the biggest problems of the world is wealthy and powerful people have no limit to how much wealth and power they want. So, and we know that people should be generous and people should think about the greater good, but it doesn't mean that everybody will. And I don't know if AI can stop that. So anyway, I digress. We currently have a human form, and we currently have our ordinary intelligence that we can apply to Buddhist practice. And I believe this is a result of great and vast merits. And applying your ordinary intelligence to these wonderful teachings can help you. You don't need actually to see much. You need to see impermanence, a phenomenon arising and ceasing, arising and ceasing. You need to know if a mind state is wholesome, neutral, or unwholesome. You need to have ethical behavior, and just keep paying attention to these three characteristics. And your clinging and attachment, your deluded attachment to perceiving it as something permanent and pleasant will get weaker and weaker, and you will be able to liberate yourself from it. So we don't need to know that much. What we need to do is develop nice, clear mindfulness and apply it within the parameters of this body to know arising, staying for some time, ceasing, arising, staying for some time, ceasing, wholesome, neutral, unwholesome. Know it, let it go. Know it, let it go. Know it, let it go. And you might get liberated before the AI enslaves us all. May it be so. Maybe the AI will help us all. Strategic optimism.
Question 2, dear Ajahn. Why do humans have regrets? What does Lord Buddha say about regret? Thank you.
That's another interesting question. I guess regrets occur for most people when they think of choices that they made and they made a wrong choice or things didn't go as they'd hoped. But regret is different to remorse. You know, people can regret marrying that guy instead of the guy who was more rich. So a woman might regret marrying the guy with less money. A man might regret marrying the woman who was less beautiful. Doesn't mean there's anything wholesome there necessarily. There's a phrase, interestingly enough, a life without regrets is a life not lived. So we have to be in our pursuit of trying to understand what is true and noble. Many people go down some interesting side alleys, make some mistakes, but then we hopefully learn from those things. Remorse is a different thing. Remorse is when we know that we've not acted on our better abilities, our more noble intentions. We've acted unskillfully, affected by either greed, hatred, or delusion, or several of them. And then we feel bad about it. I had a recent chat with a man in Ubon where I was, and he admits he's a bit of a gangster and a bit of a womanizer. And he did a retreat in a monastery, and he felt remorse to his first, I believe he's had 7 wives, and he felt some remorse, and he actually asked forgiveness and said sorry and dedicated merit to his first 2 wives, and felt some remorse and dedicated merit and asked forgiveness of his parents. It's an interesting thing that occurs that when one spends time with oneself, stops distracting oneself, and generates more mindfulness. Mindfulness has this wonderful quality, whereas it knows things more truthfully. And so just in the act of this man keeping precepts, spending more time by himself and meditating, he is accepting, yeah, that was unskillful. Yeah, that was unskillful. Yeah, that was unskillful. And feeling some remorse and generating merit and dedicating merit. So it's important to differentiate between remorse and guilt. So remorse is a wholesome thing. Lord Buddha describes 2 qualities, hiri and ottappa, guardians of the world. One is conscience, and the other is a wholesome sense of shame. So a wholesome sense of shame isn't a crippling sense of guilt or self-loathing or self-hatred. All of those things are unskillful. a wholesome sense of shame that comes from having a conscience is wholesome. The reason it's wholesome is because it helps us understand when I behave unskillfully, I feel bad. I also cause others to feel bad. I don't want to do that anymore. And we attenuate our behavior. So that's the skillful function that remorse has. Ottappa, a wholesome sense of shame. What does the Buddha say about remorse? The Buddha says one of the benefits of keeping the ethical precepts is freedom from remorse. So you could deduce from that if you break the precepts, you are going to experience remorse. When you keep your ethical precepts quite purely, this is a tremendous support to meditation, because when you come and you know you haven't killed any beings, you know you haven't stolen, you haven't lied, you've been sexually responsible, you're not getting intoxicated. There's a natural sense of well-being that manifests in the mind, and a lovely sense of knowing that you're not doing anything bad. And the result of that is a healthy sense of self-esteem and self-respect. So that's why Lord Buddha encourages us. Also, similarly with generosity, when the foundation, it's like when you know that if you have a certain amount of wealth to share, or if you have some abilities, if you know you've been generous, there's a lovely sense of dignity that comes from that. Recently, I had my 51st birthday, and it's a tradition actually since the very first year that I came to the village that I depend upon for alms. I've found ways to be generous towards the village. And one way to be generous towards the village, which I think is quite effective, is to help with the children's education costs. Because if one family has 2 kids or 3 kids on a farmer's income, they're struggling more. So if you're helping each kid, you're helping that family. And so, and then I think we've got about 10 teenagers, young adults in technical college and university. So the village is only 200 people. And within a couple of years, I think my students and I will have helped 10 of them to get tertiary education. And we've helped each of them from kindergarten to university. We help each of them once a year to get with a certain amount of money to help with uniforms, school books, and shoes, etc. And it just feels nice. It feels nice to know that we've been generous. And similarly with sharing Dhamma, it's like when you have some knowledge, you have some experience, and you share it freely. It's just one of those things that a wholesome sense of dignity, a wholesome sense of self-esteem. You have something to share, you've shared it, you continue to share it. And this is all of this is conducive to pleasant mind states when you come to meditate. It's like, yes, we depend upon the kindness of other beings, the generosity of other beings. And so we also have to manifest that to the degree that we can. And that's conducive to not having too many regrets, or at least balancing out your regrets with wholesome self-esteem and self-respect from knowing that you're now doing your best, and that making some incremental improvements.
Question 3, dear Ajahn. How can we guard ourselves from the negative energies of others when we sense that a particular conversation or interaction is going to affect us badly? Thank you.
Somewhat inevitable, isn't it? When we are social creatures, we have to interact with others. And some people have quite heavy negative mind states, not all the time, but sometimes. Probably most of us have sometimes. Some people have more often, and some people have more negative energy behind their negative mind states. It depends how much kilesa the said being has. It is a bit tricky because we cultivate loving kindness and mindfulness, and this loving kindness and mindfulness in some respects makes us more sensitive. And there's no way around that. And so in the beginning stages, we're probably affected by the negativity of others more. One thing that I've found helpful is if you become skilled at the practice of generating loving kindness for yourself and others. So the first stage is holding that loving kindness in your chest and heart area in your upper body. And then you radiate it out to people you find it easy to have metta for, and then more neutral beings, and then difficult, challenging beings, and then all beings. But if you become somewhat adept at that skill, when you have to be with someone who has heavy negative energy, then you spread loving kindness to yourself. So you hold that loving kindness in your heart and body. So on one level, there's some negative energy coming your way, but on another level, you're generating positive energy and you're holding it in your own body and mind. And the people around you don't need to know that you're breathing in, may I be well, breathing out, may I be happy, breathing in, may I be well, breathing out, may I be happy. Because when we try to develop loving kindness for all sentient beings, we understand that you are one of those. I am one of those. So at the time when you have some suffering, it's appropriate to have loving kindness and compassion for yourself at that time. And metta is a protection. It's probably inevitable that you're going to pick up some negativity sometimes, but the thing about becoming an adept at the metta practice is that you can get back on your cushion and you can use the metta to wash out that negativity. You basically replace negativity with positivity, and you have to become skilled at generating that positivity in your own mind, which is perfectly possible to do. People tend to be a little bit lazy. It's not just a matter of, may I be well, may I be happy. You have to mean it. You have to be disciplined. You have to really practice holding this metta in your heart area. And if you do it every day, the first 5 or 10 minutes of your meditation, you will become skilled at it and you will be able to pick it up when you need it in the moment. But it requires that daily discipline to become adept and to remember in the moment, pick that up now, pick my metta up for myself now. And, probably other things that you could do, like I often use a wrist mala, just feeling the beads moving through your wrists. If you have a board meeting or something, or people can't see what you're doing with your hand, if you're able to just sit there, maybe you've got a mala under the table, butto, 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 and you're just, you're reminding yourself to be really present, really mindful, really centered, feeling those beads, feeling your breath. Good mindfulness is another protective. But, even I recently went to a gathering and hundreds of monks, and I had to sit. My role was to sit in the middle of this gathering for 2.5 hours as one of the official meditation monks. I had to sit there. And different monks did different things. And I came home, came back to my monastery, I felt quite unwell. And I called up my teacher. I said, Tanatana, what's going on? And he said, yeah, because not all of the monks were good. And not all of the monks this wasn't a gathering of forest monks, this was a gathering of 200 monks from northern Thailand from several traditions. Some of them are not virtuous and some of them don't have the best of intentions. He said it's a bit like being in the middle of the market, meditating in the middle of the market for 2.5 hours. You don't know what energies are there. And so I kind of hadn't quite prepared properly for that. Just kind of everyone's wearing a robe, so you assume certain things, but we can't assume that these days. But he told me which chants to do before going into such a gathering in the future, and what to do while sitting in the middle of a large gathering for hours. So even after 27 years of practice, I can pick up negative energy and be affected by it. The point is, what do we do with it? We learn how to wash it out of the mind more quickly, and we learn how to regenerate the positive energy more quickly as well. So you become more kind of capable of rolling with the punches and getting up on your feet more quickly. So we can all do this with a good energetic chanting session, metta, sometimes a bit of exercise, a shower. These are things we can do to shift negative energy. So light some incense, light some candles, offer some flowers, cuddle a kitten.
Question for Dear Ajahn. I have a very severe chronic illness that's basically destroyed my life. My illness often makes it hard for me to practice. Are there specific types of good karma I can do to try and alleviate sickness? Or is all good karma equally beneficial in this regard? What about with dana? Would some places I can give dana be more effective than others for helping with sickness? Thank you, Ajahn.
So I know several senior monks who I believe are arahants. And so even though their mind is established in liberation, their bodies are affected by illness because that's one of the conditions. Part of being in a conditioned body in a conditioned realm is that's part of the condition. Bodies are subject to unpleasant feelings and illness and aging and the death of the body. So these enlightened masters who I know, on their birthday, with the teacher's blessings, on their birthday, they often release larger numbers of fish, turtles, and crabs, and sometimes cows and buffaloes. And this is specifically to increase. So you imagine you're a crab. In Asian markets, the crabs are tied up with strings. So they tie up their claw and then they tie their claws to their body, but they don't kill them because they want them to be fresh. So the crab is stuck in a bucket for many hours, feeling out of the water, frightened, and restrained in a very kind of unpleasant manner. So when the students of the teachers snip those strings off the body of the crab and snip those strings off the claws of the crab, and the crab suddenly feels it can move again, and then they throw the crab into the water and the crab scurries down and the crab's having a feeling of freedom from oppression, freedom from fear, some kind of a sense of finding a refuge. And so if several hundreds of beings are experiencing that, fear, oppression, general misery, and you go and cause those beings to feel a sense of freedom, a sense of relief, an absence of fear, a sense of finding safety, obviously that's going to have a positive outcome for the person who's helping those beings. So when it's 100 crabs, 1,000 fish, 200 eels, a bunch of turtles, then it is a very particular type of merit. So those beings were going to be eaten. So you extended their lifespan as well. So it's another reason that these great masters allow their students to do it, is because the merit that is produced is going to increase their lifespan. And particularly with things like cows and buffaloes, because they have a large amount of consciousness and they tend to live quite long lives. So there are farms in Thailand that will take these beings and just allow them to wander around and eat grass. So it's quite expensive, but when a lot of students band together, was at Lumpur Biek's birthday earlier in the year, and I think there was a truck full of buffaloes and cows that were saved from the slaughterhouse and released. It was at Ajahn Anand's birthday, and we released the turtles and the crabs and the fish. And then the students dedicate that merit to the teacher. So that is, I've seen many times, one way that I don't know in Western countries if it's probably not quite the same. I don't know if you can, like in Thailand, certain types of markets where the fish are still in buckets, but they haven't been killed. I think in a lot of Western countries, the fish are dead and they're in ice. But in Asia, they're still alive and they can be rescued. But that kind of thing. And then medicines that alleviate symptoms. So offering medicines to people who are sick. And so that's one of the traditional offerings to the monastics, is food, clothing, logic, and medicines. And, so that's some of the types of merit that can be made. When beings are experiencing painful feelings, and there's a way to be generous which alleviates or lessens those painful feelings. So during the lockdowns, the COVID lockdowns, my students helped me to feed 150 very hungry families in Bodh for a couple of years, because when the tourists didn't come, those people had no income at all and no government support either. And so they would have appreciated getting a big bag of groceries every 6 weeks or so. And did something similar in Kathmandu Valley as well. I wasn't doing it to avoid illness or increase my life. I was leading that simply out of a sense of altruistic care for people who needed help but couldn't help themselves. But it will have the consequence of probably increasing health and lifespan. So yeah, is there particular merits that are more potent? Lord Buddha does say that the quality of the offering, the quality of the intention, and the quality of the recipient are all factors that are going to affect the amount of good karma, the quality of the good karma. So you have a good intention, you want to practice Dhamma, you want to purify your mind. But then you need to find worthy recipients and the quality offerings that will increase the potency of the merit. There's a bit of a shadow side in Thailand is that lots of people want to make offerings to the monasteries. Lots of people want to build jetties and build Buddha statues, but people aren't so nice to orphans, for example, or animals. It's a bit of a shadow side of Thai Buddhism, is it because people want to make the most merit. So they want to build a jetty, they want to have a Buddha statue, they want to build a kuti for the abbot, they want to make offerings to an arahant. The arahant might have a room full of medicines and a cupboard full of robes, but they want to offer medicines and robes to the arahant. So that's what happens. And oftentimes the great masters in Thailand will build a hospital or help an orphanage. So the monks themselves end up re-gifting the gifts, recycling the goodness, and directing it in areas where it needs to go. It's interesting. It seems to be more of a Christian idea, Christian charitableness to help the needy and people who are suffering, which is quite nice. And it's more of a Western thing where people want to help the environment. It seems like Western countries. I think after civilizations develop materially and abundantly for a certain point, then people start to think about the environment. In Thailand, the forest has traditionally been a place of snakes, tigers, bears, and malaria, as well as fierce ghosts. So archetypally, Thai people don't think forest is a place of coolness, freshness. It's not like going for a trek in Yosemite or going a lovely walk in a national park in Australia where there's lovely trails. They don't really like forests. So I tend to need to, even I know millionaires who are Thai, and I have said to them repeatedly that I have difficulty finding my grass cutting budget to get my forest to grow. Those said millionaires have helped once to cut the grass once, and I need to cut the grass 5 times a year, and we're getting on 13 years now. And it's like, they say, do you need anything? Do you need anything in your mention? And somehow it doesn't register. Most of the money for the grass cutting and the forestry project has come from Australia and, curiously enough, Scotland. People in other places who never even come here are helping me to grow a forest. But the Thais are great if we're building a jetty or another Buddha statue or and they love to turn up with flowering shrubs, plant them around my kuti and line them up along the paths. And anyway, the thing is, there are a lot of good people that want to cultivate goodness in various ways, and sometimes you have to liaise. We get our forestry budget from Western countries. We get our Buddha statue budget from Thai countries. We get our scholarship budget from Malaysia, Singapore, and, the different people that want to make merit in different ways. Somehow we can do a lot of good things.
Thank you,
Look who's
Prajan.
just come. Look who's just come to say hi again. She had a little nap. Now she's saying hi. Say hi to the people. Hi. Probably can't hear her purring. She's purring. So this is a purebred Siamese cat. And I've lived in Siam for 27 years. And this is my first Siamese cat. They're not so common anymore. And traditionally, you may be interested to know, or you may not be interested to know, but anyway, I'll tell you anyway. So, the cats in Thailand, I think there's a 10 or 12 species of purebred cats. And they were traditionally bred and reared in monasteries and the palace. And they weren't, ordinary people didn't used to have cats. The cats have a long-standing relationship in the palace and the monastery. One of the reasons the cats were in the monastery was because the ancient scriptures were on they're written on palm leaves, which were susceptible to being eaten by mice. So you had to have a few cats around in the monastery to protect your scriptures. Monasteries which had a lot of resources could actually dig a pond, a bit of a pool, and they used to have like a library surrounded by water. That was to keep out the termites as well as the mice and the rats. So the cats had this interesting role to play where they helped protect the scriptures. So one of the reasons the Dharma has been able to be handed down to us is because cats like to eat mice. So, and interestingly enough, when the Burmese invaded in Thailand at one point, and they saw these cats in the big, beautiful monasteries with lots of gold leaf and things, and they saw them in the palace, they drew the conclusion that cats were lucky and conducive to having great wealth and power. So they took all the cats back to Burma. They took all the cats from Thailand back to Burma. And so there's another cat that I have, which is Westerners call a Burmese cat, because they found it in Burma. But actually, that Burmese cat is one of the purebred Thai cats that had been kidnapped, and taken to Burma. So, and there is an ancient text in Thailand about purebred species of cats. So, anyway, we all have hobbies. Cats is one of my hobbies, and Aparajita is one of the supporters, the main supporter of my cat hobby. She offered both the Burmese and the Siamese cat. Thank you for that. I think my comfort animal in times of stress, my comfort animals. I think they have done studies that people who have pets live longer lives, are less likely to experience depression. And also for people who have PTSD, taking care of an animal helps them manage their kind of psychological challenges. So there are benefits to owning pets. Of course, when they get sick or when they're not getting along, that also affects your mind a bit as well. So got to take the good with the bad.